So now we want to make sure that when our ball goes off the bottom of the screen, our players can go back to playing the game. So the first thing we're going to do is create an area, much like we did for the goals in the previous project, so that when the player's ball enters these zones, we know that we can call what's going on. So we're going to first of all create a new empty object that we will call we'll call it the respawn zone. We're going to add a box collider to it, box collider 2D. We're going to make sure that it's a trigger so that our ball doesn't just bounce off it when it hits the bottom. And then we're going to drag it down here, and I'm going to scale it up on the x-axis so it covers all of the bottom just like that. And so when our ball enters this zone now, we want it to do something. But to know whether it's entered this zone and not some other zone, we want to make sure that we give this a unique tag. And the tag we're going to give it is respawn. It's one of the default ones already built into Unity, so it's very handy. So we're going to click on that and just add it there so we don't have to create it ourselves. And now we're going to check how to add this, or not how to add this, but how to make this work within our scripts. So we know that if we were to go to our ball, for example, and now if we entered this zone, we could say our ball active is no longer true, so we get reset back to be just above our paddle. But we'd also need to reset on our game manager the game active bool to go back to being false. So let's look at doing that in our scripts. So on our ball controller, down here, just below our on collision exit, we can add a new void on trigger enter 2D, just like we did before, and say collider 2D other, so whatever the other collider is that we just entered the trigger for. What we'll do is check if the other dot tag is equal to respawn. Again, we need to make sure it's spelled correctly. And if that other tag is respawn is correct, then what we'll do is we'll need to set our ball active back to being false, so that our rigid body's velocity will be set to 0 and our position will be set back to the start point. So here we can say, okay, ball active equals false, like that. And the next thing we need to do is on our game manager, we need to set this bool back to being false. So what we could do is create a reference to the game manager. Well, we will create a reference to the game manager, but what we could then do is just directly set this bool to be false, and that would be perfectly fine. But we'll want to, as we go further in the game, add more functionality to this. Like, we want to have lives that our player can lose, and then when we have lives, we'll want our game manager to be counting down those lives as we go. So what we're going to do is create a function that we'll call public void respawn. Actually, we'll call it respawn ball, and we'll put our little brackets in. And within this function, this is what we're going to use to set our game active equals false. Because like I said, later on, we'll also, within this function, have this will take away a life from the player, and it'll do some other little bits and pieces as we go further in the game too. So now that we have a life being taken away, or sorry, now we have our respawn being set, so our game active is now set back to being false. On our ball controller, we'll need a reference to our game manager. So back up the top here, we'll create a private game manager called the GM. And the reason we're making this private is we know there'll only be one game manager in our scene. There's no point in having multiple game managers. So we can do the same thing we've done before in our start function of saying, okay, the game manager is equal to find the object that has the type game manager. So that means it'll find the right object within our world because there's only one of them. And then down here, back in our on trigger enter, we can say, okay, on the game manager, call the function respawn ball. Then we put our two brackets and hit our semicolon like that. Okay, so we'll save this and we'll jump back into our game now. And we should be able to see as soon as the ball goes down below the little zone down here, our little respawn zone, as soon as it goes down below that zone, it'll get pushed back into its position, and then we can hit the spacebar again and get back to playing our game. So there you go, you see it? Gets reset, it drops down, and it keeps getting reset back into position just the way we want it to. So say for example, we would probably want this to last maybe 3 lives or something like that, and then we would get it, when next time it hits the zone down there, we'll lose all those lives. So now that we've got our ball being reset back into position that we want to, let's actually take a look at managing those lives for our player.
Konnichiwa.